My name's Phil Goss, and today I'm going to talk about properly categorizing employees and the issue of overtime compensation. No employee wants to pay overtime if they don't have to. Federal law and state laws require that any time after 40 hours per week must be paid at a rate of 1.5 times. Many employees decide to try to get around these rules by either considering their employees to be salaried employees, or they consider their employees to be independent contractors. We're going to discuss that issue now. In order for a person to be a properly salaried employee, a three-part test must be met. Federal law requires that at least $455 of compensation be paid to that person per week. Federal law also requires that that individual has supervisory control over 2 or more full-time employees, which could of course mean 4 part-time employees, but it must be supervisory control over at least 2 plus full-time employees. The third test is that they cannot be docked for pay. So in other words, if Aunt Mildred dies and they have to travel to Des Moines, Iowa for 3 days, you don't dock their salary or dock their pay for those periods of time. State law can require a different standard, but never less than the $455 per week. It could be a situation where they say $500 or $600 per week. If you follow those rules, then you have what's referred to as a salaried employee, or as the IRS refers to as an exempt employee. They're exempt from having to pay their overtime compensation. Then at that point, that person is eligible to work, and you're not required to pay time and a half for any hours over 40. Regular employees, however, you are required to pay overtime any time over 40 hours per week. Now let's discuss that. What does work mean? Work does not mean just within your entity. Work could be considered, do you call up an employee or text an employee in the morning and ask them to stop by Office Depot and pick up a ream of paper? If you do that, they're on the clock at that point. Do you give them a cell phone and tell them that they're required, or as part of their job requirements, to answer the phone after hours? If you do, you run the risk that that could be work time as well. The third thing would be if you send them on an errand, go get lunch, go pick up Sensei Jones from the airport, whatever that case may be. Those are situations as well where you have considered to be someone to be on the clock. So it's important that you keep track of what's going on in that regard. The second thing is the difference between independent contractors and employees. Employers like to consider people independent contractors because you don't have to pay matching taxes or Social Security. That's a good thing. However, most people are not independent contractors. Independent contractors are defined under the IRS by a 20-part test. And the basic outline is that if you have control over their work, telling them what time to be there, what to do, how to do their work, provide the tools for them, you likely have an employee, not an independent contractor. Independent contractors are people that would come into your school perhaps to teach a weapons class or something along those lines, and you pay them for a daily basis. That would be an independent contractor. If you fail to pay an employee the way they should be paid and try to categorize them as an independent employee, or an independent contractor, you will run into trouble and with the Wage and Hour Board in your state. So it really makes no sense to try to miscategorize employees. The penalties can be fines, the penalties can be past monies that should have been paid, but probably the worst one is that likely you're going to have the Internal Revenue Service snooping around your business, and no one wants to do that. So what I'd like to leave you on is that this is probably the most fertile area of employee-employer type disputes that end their way into court or the administrative courts. And you want to make sure that you understand the difference between a salaried and a non-salaried employee and an independent contractor.